Hey, everybody. Welcome to another weekly live. Sorry about that. Learned a good lesson just then. If Streamlabs is in the middle of an update and hangs up, your video camera doesn't work. So, good lesson. Anyway, let's roll on. So, thanks so much for tuning in. And we're going to do a little bit of a potpourri this week. And the reason why is because there's so many different things going on in AI these days that there's many different things to cover. But just to frame the context of what has happened in the last 40 plus years is very, very interesting. I heard Ray Kurzweil, who I'm sure most of you know who that is, but Ray Kurzweil was talking about computational power. So, computational power since 1965 has increased by a trillion. A trillion. How's that? Since 1980, 40 years ago, a billion times more computational power. And I'm sure many of you have heard this comment, but back when Bill Clinton was president from 1992 to 2000, all of the computing power available to him as president of the United States in those days was less than your smartphone today. So that's pretty insane. And um, it's crazy how much computational power has increased since the dawn of mainframes a trillion times. Um, there's another very important parallel thing that's been going on that Ray Kurzweil mentioned, and that is 50% deflation in the cost of technology. So, in other words, the same technology today cost half of what it did 10 years ago. And that is continuing decade over decade. And that's just a crazy, crazy statistic. And hey, DRS, how are you today? Thanks for tuning in. So, then I heard Ray talking about one of his predictions that he made already, I think, 20 years ago. But computers will match humans in capability by 2029, the end of this decade that we're in now. In other words, 7 years from now, computers will match human capability. And by 2045, computers will have enhanced intelligence, meaning smarter than people. This is all within our lifetimes. So there's other technologies that are on this kind of progression, right? And another one of them is 3D printing. And right about now, 3D printing is about to cross the threshold of what's called submicron processing, which a micron is a very, very small metric unit. And submicron 3D printing opens up 3D printing clothes, 3D printing virtually any food, 3D printing pharmaceuticals, and many, many different things. So that is what is happening technologically. But in the context of AI, that computing power is great. It's a necessary condition, but it's not a sufficient condition. So the other necessary conditions that add up to being sufficient for AI to work is uh, algorithmic sophistication, which has increased dramatically since the working neural net 10 years ago, right now, 2012, but really perfected by 2015, so less than 10 years. But there's another thing that I wanted to talk about briefly today that is just as important as how good your algorithm is, how good your data set is, and how much processing power you have. And we've talked about all those many times before, but there's another thing, and that is what's called ML ops or machine learning ops. So right now, AI as a practical tool is still limited to big companies, or you can lease AI servers just like you can lease cloud computing. But small companies are not using AI for the most part, unless it's embedded in regular software that most small companies use, like Microsoft Office, which does have AI embedded in it. Most mid-sized companies, which is 50 million to 500 million in revenue for mid-sized companies. Most of those companies are still not using AI. Why? Because AI is still really expensive. And one of the reasons for that is ML ops or machine learning operalization. Um, so what is this? Well, uh, AI needs continuous monitoring, right? Because AI can get anomalous results due to you're continuously building your data set, right? So you're adding new data to your data set at all times, and your data set can go into an error status. That's one possibility. Another is that your algorithm gets to the point where it cannot handle the size of your data set. That's another one. Uh, but another thing that doesn't get a lot of thought and really takes large staffs for companies is how do you make AI have an actual business impact? So, AI works great for speech recognition now. AI works great for uh, sensory processing and categorization, meaning it can pick out what stuff is that it's looking at and figure out what it is. But what does this have to do with running a business day to day? Well, there's a bunch of different things we've talked about, but if you make things, if you're a manufacturing company, one of the most critical things is quality. So sensors can help you improve quality by pretty much continuously looking at and looking for defects in products coming off your assembly line. And it needs AI to do that because the volume of images is so high that a human cannot keep up with it, only an AI can. Uh, so that's one way that ML ops can be used to make machine learning work for a business. Another is incorporating data into your data set. ML ops can do that very efficiently. So, ML ops, there's a lot of careers available in this. In fact, there's more shortages right now in people terms in ML ops for the number of people needed than there is for programmers. So, a lot of things are necessary to make AI work well. To recap what I just said, massive increase in computational power has enabled AI to be feasible, along with better and better algorithms using deep learning neural nets, things like that. And we're going to talk more about deep learning in a minute. But the other thing you have to have is your team has to be able to monitor the performance of the AI and make sure it's working correctly and efficiently and not erroring out, and that is ML ops. So, next topic in our potpourri, we've talked about before, getting a job now involves getting approved by an AI. And we've talked about this a few times before, but I wanted to bring up an element of it that I haven't talked about before, and that is scrapers or scraping of the internet. So, something that has been developed in the last 10 years that many people are still not aware of is a scraper. And what a scraper does is it's basically AI that you can train to look for specific things on the internet. So, for example, if I want to set up a business that is going to buy and sell something, I can create a scraper that will scrape the internet, eBay, Amazon, all the outlets where things are sold, and find what I want to buy at a low price, and you can set parameters about it, and then you can buy it, refurb it, for example, and resell it at a much higher price. That's one way in which a scraper can be used. But another way a scraper can be used is in job applications. So this is a very, very interesting CNN article that talks about use of AI in job applications. But AI can use the scraping technology. And what does that mean? Well, that means that it's very easy today for an AI that's going to filter out job candidates to look at every single thing you've ever done in your entire life online. That is not that is well within the capability of an AI today. And it's done in a number of contexts. It's done by Google and Facebook to figure out who you are and what you like and what you can be served as an ad. But it can also be used for deciding whether or not you get a job opportunity. So you really, really, really want to be careful about what you're putting and posting online. And you want to be very careful about privacy settings so that when you're using Facebook to talk to your family, especially if your family lives a distance from you, everything is locked down tight so that only you and your family, for example, can see it, and an AI scraper can't get in to see that. So really important thing to consider. Next up, DeepMind. DeepMind is the ass kickers in cutting edge AI. They definitely are. So DeepMind's gamer AI is now better at co-op mode than human beings. So this is another breakthrough from DeepMind. And what does this mean? This means that when you are playing on a team with another person, two people were always better than AI because AI is good at looking for things, AI is good for identifying things, AI is good for predicting things, but it's not as good at cooperation until now. So this is a step change in AI, not unlike the breakthrough we talked about last week, where and have talked about more recently in other videos of self-learning AIs and things like that. All this boils down to AIs becoming more and more autonomous and self-sufficient. They're still not there by a long shot, but will they be there by 2029, as Ray Kurzweil predicted? Probably. What AIs have not been good at is what humans are good at, which is inference. So that is, a human being can be put in a situation one time, and then they can use that situation by analogy to a different situation, but understand the similarities and use that prior experience to make what they're trying to do that they've never done before easier. So this is really, really interesting. And what it means is that this ability of AI now, courtesy of DeepMind, to cooperate with another AI and play as a team and beat a human team really is a breakthrough. Just to boil this down a little bit, this breakthrough occurred through virtual capture the flag. A group of 30 AIs competed in teams of two, learning independently from a total of 450,000 games each. No human can do that. No human can do that in a lifetime. This is why eventually AIs will exceed human capability. And it's why I started the AI Guide. Going back to the beginning, I started the AI Guide to prepare you for the future that is coming and cannot be stopped, and how you will be affected. And to give you options, click the link below, free AI resource to learn more in depth about AI than I can ever do in a video segment or a live. You'll learn a lot more about AI, what it is, how it works. And again, within 2-3 years tops, you will be using AI at any job that anyone does every day. That's how pervasive AI is getting. And I want to mention that because this weekend, I was watching a few minutes of the Masters golf tournament. And the reason why I watched that is mostly because it's the most beautiful golf course I've ever seen on television in the world. And I've seen a lot on TV over the years, but the Masters is truly special. But the reason I'm bringing this up is because during this Masters, there have been 3 different companies advertising AI-enabled breakthrough technologies. What are those? GM with their self-driving hands-free vehicles, still only for freeways and divided highways and rural highways, and does not work in the city yet, but it's getting there. It's getting there. Lyft has robo taxis in Vegas that have done hundreds of thousands of trips now. Waymo's been running in Phoenix for years now and has fully autonomous taxis, but Phoenix is different than other places. Phoenix almost never has bad weather. Phoenix is flat. Phoenix is laid out in a perfect grid. It's not where it will be in a few years. And of course, all the autonomous trucks running up and down the freeway all day, every day now that no one even talks about anymore because there's millions and millions and millions of miles hands-free that have been done by trucks now. So it's almost commonplace. Again, watch the movie Logan. You'll see where that's headed. So the first advertiser is GM. The second one is AT&T, and they show a woman on a golf tee practicing her swing with an AI-enabled robot that's widely available now. I've seen a different ad where a kid was sick in the hospital, asking a girl to the high school prom with this robot thing that goes around on 2 wheels and it has a screen on it. But these 2 robots were giving this girl advice on how to hit the golf ball. So that's number 2. It's out there. It's already happening. It's called telepresence. And there's a X Prize underway right now for telepresence that it will be global in reach. In other words, I could be in LA, for example, and use a robot to actually do something in Sydney, Australia, halfway around the world. So this is already happening. And then the third, so that's GM, AT&T, and the third is IBM. IBM is running nothing but AI ads now. This is new. This is within the last 3 to 6 months. Before that, none of these ads were on the air. So that gives you another example of exponential and how things are increasing. So let's keep rolling because we're already halfway through our time here, plus. So there's a company in LA called Apsidal that is developing a universal glass optics manufacturing module and this thing is on the space station. It's already been tested. Why? Because you can make fiber optics in space with zero defects, which you cannot do here on Earth. So it's the next gen of fiber optic technology. And by the way, there's many, many things that can be made better in space with fewer defects. So space is going to become a commercial venture. The first all private crew literally just launched to the space station, and they're going to be doing activities for private companies to test things on the space station. That's what these 4 private astronauts are going to do for the next 8 to 10 days. But by the end of this decade, there will be hundreds of people probably living and working in space and doing private commercial activities. So this Apsidal is working on that. That was a quick one, but very interesting and very cutting edge. Back to Ray Kurzweil. So Ray Kurzweil and Peter Diamandis started Singularity University, which is if you want to go to learn to create a business that will change the world, you go to SU. And they have a summit every year from Singularity University. And Ray, this one's not the most recent one, it was the one before, but Ray was talking about the state of AI. And this is already over a year ago. So AI can already do radiology better than humans. So that's read an X-ray, read an MRI, read a CAT scan, all better than people. But people still need to be involved in that process. That's why at this time, AI is coexistent with people and will be for a while. To develop new vaccines. AI is used to simulate biology. Hello, COVID vaccine. This was predicted right at the start of the pandemic. By 2029, computers will be able to do anything that humans can do. Why? Because they are being enabled by other technologies that are convergent and on a parallel exponential path with AI, robotics, sensors, etc. Sorry, humidity's super low today. What is the singularity that Ray predicts? It is an implant, brain-computer interface, and you become coexistent with AI. There's a whole other aspect of AI, and the last live I did was AI being used for good, and Ray talked about that. AI being used for NGO, non-governmental organization initiatives to protect the earth and species. We talked about that, to help people with disabilities, to find refugee flows and predict where they're headed so that refugee camps can be set up to help these people, to protect cultural heritage, to improve and relieve poverty, and micro banking, which is in many parts of the world, people's lives can be dramatically changed by a few dollars. I'll give you a perfect example. For many, many years now, probably 10 or 15, I have supported a charity called FINCA, F-I-N-C-A, and this charity provides micro loans to predominantly women, but men also, but mostly women, in very impoverished nations like Haiti and parts of Central America and Africa and stuff like that. These loans are a few dollars each, but they allow the person to start a new business that literally changes their family's life. If you go to their website, they have example after example after example of this, and AI can dramatically accelerate this process. Um, Further on BCI is slowly but surely moving from science fiction to science reality. Companies like Facebook, Neuralink, Google are on a mission to connect your 100 billion neurons to 100 trillion synaptic connections directly to the cloud. If you ask me, this is Elon Musk. If you ask me, this is no longer an if, it's a matter of when. I hope everyone is watching the developments in this space very closely. This is an exponential technology that will change the entire world as we know it very, very quickly. And another parallel exponential technology that is intimately tied to BCI is AR, augmented reality, and virtual reality, but not like augmented reality. Elon Musk just said the other day that that in the near future you will be able to download yourself into an artificial being, and and yourself will live forever in this material world. This has nothing to do with spirituality and all that, but this is a mind-blowing idea. Mind-blowing. What if Albert Einstein and Galileo and people like that could have been kept alive forever, or have a 1,000-year lifetime? What they could have accomplished in 1,000 years instead of under 100 could be unbelievable. So anyway, this is a perfect example of why I started the AI Guide, because the future is going to be so profoundly different from today that less than 20 years from today, the world will be unrecognizable from what it is today. Now, next thing, traditionally AI systems are highly centralized and their intelligence is based on large proprietary data sets. To fix this, Microsoft is using their cloud platform to crowdsource the development of AI and machine learning models to allow users to, one, add their data, and two, be able to use these AIs very inexpensively. And they are paying people in Ethereum because it's safe and secure, but also to get people to give their data to these data sets. So this is an incentive-based system. It is not something, many people would do this for free, but this is, you will get paid to do this. Microsoft hopes this program will speed up the creation of large, up-to-date, publicly available data sets that they can then use to train their future AIs. Very cool stuff. So neural nets and deep learning and reinforcement learning have been breakthroughs. But what is the next step? So there's our older article in Forbes that talks about this. AI is dominated by pattern recognition techniques. Major advances recently in the field of image recognition, machine translation, audio processing, and others that we've all talked about for 2 years now. We're more than 2 years into the AI Guide and continuing to build and add things. For example, today we're streaming live on Facebook along with YouTube right now. Deep learning is not the cure to every problem. In fact, it can cause problems in its own right. The reason why is because the scale of training data for deep learning is massive. Plus, deep neural networks have the tendency to forget patterns that they have learned, unlike humans. Humans have the opposite problem. We can be dictated by parent patterns we've learned. That is addiction, for example. Deep neural networks need monster databases to train. Deep neural networks uh, are black boxes that people don't understand how they do what they do, and that's what we talked about last week. Was this breakthrough just in the last few weeks that was published, where it's a white box AI, meaning they understand how it works. There's no way to transfer what's learned from one neural net to another. And then they go into these new alternatives to replace deep neural networks. And they call one adaptive resonance theory, or ART. Addresses the problem of acquiring new knowledge without losing prior knowledge. And then confabulation helps fix the explainability problem. That may be how that group that I mentioned last week came up with the white box AI. And then finally, fuzzy sets allow data representation between binary and continuous. So right now, data sets are binary. They're this or that, whereas this new technology would be on a continuum, sort of like the human brain. So what did we learn this week? We learned that there are profound things happening at an ever accelerating pace, and the world is going to change dramatically by 2030 and completely by 2040. And we all need to be prepared for that. We need to be prepared for the good that's going to come. The cure of diseases once thought incurable. We need to be prepared for the not good that's going to come. Massive job displacement. Click the link below, get your free resource. Invest some time in yourself. The resource is free. Everything in the resource is free. If you complete the resource, you can get the opportunity to participate in my beta course called the AI Safe Career Pivot, which will let you pivot your career to something safe from AI, relatively speaking. There will be jobs for the foreseeable future that still require people, and you want to be in one of those jobs. And we can see that what it means to be a human being is going to change. Profound changes, courtesy of BCI, with people like Elon Musk and Ray Kurzweil telling you to pay great attention to this. So, also, if you want more information, click the other link below. Get my book on Amazon, A Short History of AI and How AI is Impacting 10 Industries Today. Hopefully, during 2022, I'll do an update on that, a revised and updated version, because even though that book is only a year and a half old from the time I finished it, and only 6 months or 9 months ago from publishing, it is already starting to be dated because of exponentialism. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you next week without the problems. I'll make sure the app is updated. Lesson learned. Take care. Have a great week. Go